Aloha, I'm Eva Andrade. I'm the president and CEO of Hawaii Family Forum. And on today's episode of Faith in Politics, we are going to try to navigate the media storm that has been generated ever since the election. So let's chat about that. We are so excited right now to be doing this from K-Light Radio. So big shout out to everybody over at K-Light and also KALO TV for making this happen. My guest today, Jim Hochberg, our one and only local expert in the law. Of course, he's going to laugh as I'm saying that, but he really is, and he's someone that we trust. He's going to be joining us today, along with attorney Fritz Rolfing, who is going to give us a little bit of a breakdown on some of the numbers that we've seen in the election. So welcome to the show today, Mr. Jim Hochberg.
Well, thanks. And everybody should know that I myself rely on Fritz for election result analysis because he lives and breathes this stuff. So we're really lucky to have an expert like him.
No, we really are, because not everybody lives and breathes numbers. That is for sure. I know I don't. I know my eyes can glaze over, but Fritz is going to make it a little bit more exciting for us today. So, Mr. Jim Hochberg, are you able to sleep over these past few days?
You mean because of the election that's still ongoing?
Yes.
Oh, of course. God's in control. Jesus is on the throne. Trump's going to get reelected.
Well, as we were talking before we started the show today, I've worked with you for so long. I know that one of the reasons that you're able to do that is because you truly believe that justice is going to prevail. And even after all of this media storm announcing Joe Biden president-elect, you believe that President Trump is going to have a second term. Am I correct?
You are correct. We're going to see Micah 6:8 in action.
So before we jump into all of the details we're going to be talking about today, I'm just curious, though, how do you think that's going to play out? So you know half of the country right now is rejoicing because of President-elect Biden, which has been announced by the media. But what is going to happen if, for some reason, after all this plays out, President Trump gets a second term? Do you think that suddenly all these people are going to be, okay, well, that's it? Or do you think we're going to have 4 years of pandemonium and chaos?
There's a third option. They're not going to be okay. They're going to want to do pandemonium, but the federal government isn't going to allow it like they did before the election because elections impact those kinds of decisions. I think they're going to be very upset, but I don't think they're going to get away with what they got away with earlier this year.
Yeah, and I think, in the show today, we really want to talk about that. So I want to do two things today, Jim Hochberg, and I want you to help make that happen. So what I want to do is I want to paint this picture of what people are hearing in the media. Okay, so no matter what you believe about the reports of the media, I want to start with that. Okay, so we're going to start with what people are hearing. And then I would love to get your opinion on what people are hearing so that as their friends and family are quoting these things to them, that they're able to have a decent conversation with them. Are you willing to do that?
I am. And I think it's really important that meaning is, we have to understand that meaning is based on the content of what you're hearing and the context in which it's being said. That's how you arrive at meaning. If you simply accept what you're being told without putting it in the right context, you'll be misled. And I think that's what's going on.
Well, we want to make sure that that's our biggest message in every show we always do, is that there is a responsibility on each person to make sure what they're hearing is factual. And I know we're expecting a call from Fritz to come in. So once that call comes in, then we're going to go ahead and jump to that call with Fritz. So we will make that happen.
So let me start the context before he calls. The context of this election started at the last election. And the context is that the media and the Democrats from day one for the last 4 years have been just pummeling President Trump with all kinds of claims, accusations, investigations. And that's part of the context of the election, because the voting is not being done in a vacuum. And there's evidence, there's a reason to believe that the way the vote counting is being done is simply a continuation of the context from before the election.
Okay, so I believe that we do have Fritz now on the phone, and we'd like to welcome him to the show today. Fritz Rolfing, welcome to the program.
Hi, Eva. Glad
Hey,
to
Fritz.
be here.
Yeah, we've got Jim Hochberg here too, Fritz. So, we're going to have a very good conversation with the two of you. So, Fritz,
All right.
I know that one of the things Jim and I were talking about before we got you on the phone is how much you love numbers and you like statistics, and you actually live for this stuff, right? After an election, you're actually digging through all of the results because you like to get down to some of the things regular people may not know. Am I correct?
It is, and one of the things I thought about this as you were after you had asked me to come on, and my feeling is that people think numbers are dry, dry data, but numbers tell a story, and what you have to do is understand what story they're telling, and they can tell many stories, and there are some very interesting ones that have come out of this election, as come out of all elections.
Yeah, so before we jump into the national scene, which is probably going to take the bulk of the conversation, I do want to get your thoughts on the Hawaii election, because when we look at the numbers, we know that in Hawaii, there was 365,000 votes for Joe Biden and 196,000 for Trump. And when you looked at those numbers, you had some thoughts about the increase in turnout. Would you like to share your thoughts on that?
Sure. Like you said, and like everybody has said, there was a large increase in voter turnout. But what the nature of that increase is also a separate story. And so what we saw between comparing from 2016 to 2020, which is interesting because you had one of the same people on the ballot was Donald Trump. And then in 2016, Hillary Clinton was the Democratic Party nominee. This year, of course, it was former Vice President Biden. And so there was a large difference in the votes that both those candidates received. Joe Biden received almost 100,000 more votes in Hawaii than Hillary Clinton did, that's significant, but it's consistent with the increased turnout. But it's also interesting that Donald Trump, despite being a Republican and all of the negative press that he's gotten for 4 years, especially in Hawaii, he had an increase of almost 68,000 votes over his 2016 total. And to me, that's something worth looking at, that you had 68,000 more people in Hawaii, despite his party and his bad press. 68,000 more people in Hawaii came out and filled in the ballot for Donald Trump, who happened to be at the very bottom of the long list, if you recall your ballot, of presidential nominees on our ballot. And so when I look at the increase for Joe Biden and the increase for Trump, what struck me that was interesting was, if you just take the new voters, right, the new people that voted either for Biden or for Trump in 2020, that Trump garnered about 40% of those new voters. And that is a big surprise to me, because if he was terribly unpopular, which normally an incumbent that if an incumbent is going to lose an election, it's usually because they become very unpopular. But they don't. I've never seen a situation where the incumbent actually increases their vote total, and yet the challenger in Hawaii, at least, the challenger, it had even a larger increase. It's very unusual, but it's also unusual that such a high percentage compared to the previous election would have gone for Trump. So 40% of the new voters, now 60% of them went for Biden, but still, when you're starting at 30%, right, that Trump got in the 2016 election, to me, it's significant.
So, Fritz, what do you think, though, that Joe Jorgensen got over 5,000 votes? I mean, Jim was joking earlier that he didn't even realize there were more candidates than Biden and Trump. But, Jim went in voting knowing exactly who he was going to vote for. So what is your thoughts on Joe Jorgensen?
That's true. I didn't look at the list. I went to T.
Yes. Well, I mean, third-party candidates are always a factor in almost every national election now, at least for the last 30 years. Gary Johnson in Hawaii got almost 16,000 votes, and he was a little better known candidate for the Libertarian Party than Joe Jorgensen was, and she got, as you said, 5,000. So Johnson was over 3.5% in Hawaii. Jorgensen was 1% of the larger turnout. So she wasn't as much of a factor in Hawaii as Johnson was previously. And my interpretation of 2016 in terms of Hillary's vote was there were just a lot of people that voted for a third party in Hawaii. The Green candidate, Jill Stein, also got quite a few votes, and the Green candidate in 2020 did not get anywhere close to that. So.
Well, when you look at the numbers, though, I mean, there's no surprise that, as usual, the Democrats did very, very well in Hawaii, as they normally do. Is there any other thoughts that you have based on the analysis that you've done on the Hawaii election?
Well, the thing that Republicans need to do is they need to find out where are those new voters, those new Trump voters from, because it's never spread evenly throughout. I mean, it may be somewhat even, but it is probably concentrated in several representative districts. And so they need to find out where those new voters came from and where they were equal to the new the Democratic presidential voters, because that's where they should concentrate their efforts. So it's a big story, and whichever party is able to energize these new voters to come and become regular voters for their candidates is going to be more successful going forward.
So, Fritz, what I'm hearing you say is there's a possibility that the Hawaii legislature can have more than 5 Republicans if the people that voted for Trump are congregated in certain House districts that can actually elect Republicans?
Yes.
Wow.
It's absolutely true.
Well, I think where we have to start with that discussion is that as people are listening to the show, they need to start thinking 2 years in advance already. We need to be thinking about 2022, and then we need to be thinking about 2024. And I think that to get better people onto the list so that when people go into the voting booth, that it's easier for them to make a choice. So I think that we can talk about voters and their responsibility, and we need to keep talking about that. But we also need to start encouraging good people with good moral character to start running for office. And
right. And one of the things, just to throw in a couple of thoughts there, one of the things some of these good people who are willing to put their name on the ballot and their neck on the line need to really think through is somehow people seem to be attracted to run for the higher offices of the United States Senate or the United States House of Representatives. And so you'll get a congregation of 6 or 7 people in the smaller parties, including the smaller Republican Party, who will run for Congress when, if they would focus on the state House or the state Senate, they might have a better chance, whereas it's extremely difficult to run at such a high level as a congressional district or a statewide U.S. Senate race. So if you hear somebody who's thinking of running for a very high office, if they don't have any political experience, perhaps you could encourage them to consider running for a state or a county office instead, and put their effort in something that is a doable win and not something that is going to be unsuccessful, because that brings up the other issue that came up. And I compared the vote for the Democratic Party's presidential candidate to the combined vote of the nominees of the Democratic Party for Congressional District 1 and Congressional District 2. And there were more votes for Biden than for, if you combine those two now congressmen-elect. Ed Case is already a congressman, and it was over 10% higher for Joe Biden than for the two winners of the congressional races. But that's not an unusual outcome. because there's a lot of these new voters came in, and they may not have even known who their party's congressional candidate was, or didn't care, or left that blank, or whatever. But that was even more pronounced on the Republican side. If you look at, with 197,000 votes for Trump, if you combine the nominees for Congressional District 1 and Congressional District 2 for the House of Representatives, they were 25% lower than the person at the top of the ticket, Donald Trump. So people didn't, there are not enough people knew who they were. So even people that voted for Donald Trump, 25% or approximately 25% of them did not vote for the Republican nominees for the congressional races.
You make a good point, and I kind of want to go back to something that you said earlier. So when you're talking or encouraging people to run for office, I think another office that's often overlooked, and it shouldn't be, is the neighborhood boards. I think that, if someone kind of has an interest and maybe they're not ready to jump in to run for, a representative seat or a senator seat, I think that they should consider going to the neighborhood boards, because don't the neighborhood boards have a really good way of connecting with local politicians to make some difference, especially when it comes to your own district?
That's a really good point, Eva, and the answer is yes. And they are elected positions, but the competition is nowhere near as fierce as certainly for federal offices, but even for state house and state senate. And so the likelihood of winning a neighborhood board seat is much higher, and you become known, and you get to know what the issues are in the community. And that can serve as as an educational vehicle, an opportunity to give service to the community, and possibly a springboard if you want to run for a more challenging office.
Yeah, and so in these last couple of minutes before I let you go, Fritz, I just want to make that point that, again, we're going to always encourage people in the community to get involved in politics. The show is called Faith in Politics. We know that everybody is called and gifted. They have things, talents and strengths that the Lord has given them, and we want them to use it in the community. We want them to go where the Lord is leading them. But we also strongly encourage people to use wisdom when they are doing that,
right,
and to know,
right,
what office to run for and to do it the right way. And really, even though we could be saying this for the Republican Party, we are also encouraging people that are strong, faith-filled Democrats to also run and to make a difference in the local Democratic Party. I mean, it's going to be hard, right? We're not saying that somebody who is a Democrat and a person of faith is able to just go and change the party overnight. Jim is sitting here, and I can feel the vibes just coming across the table for him, because it's a hard thing to do. But we believe that you take your faith into the community, and that's how you affect change. So, Fritz, before we let you go on this call today, any last thoughts?
Hey, Fritz, before you do that, you sent me an email, and I think you sent it to Eva too, about your examination of the President Trump's approval rating since the election. And if you want to share that was astoundingly interesting to me.
That's an interesting fact, that his approval rating, at least in the Rasmussen poll, which is the only daily approval rating poll that has been going on for I think at least 12 years, if not more, and Gallup doesn't do that anymore. But his approval rating has actually risen since the election, and the disapproval and the strong approval has increased, and the strong disapproval has decreased. And I was trying to think about how that could be the case. He had been on a trend going up in terms of approval rating through October. He was at a low at the beginning and gradually improved. But he's been steadily improving even on that since the election. And I can think of two things. One, there was just a natural just how the course of the campaign, the COVID crisis and everything has gone, there was going to be a kind of a trend towards him. Although he may, if he loses this race when all the votes are finally counted, one of the reasons will probably be because a lot of people voted in the middle or early October, when when he was less popular. But the other factor, I think, is, and you always have to consider this, is the amount of negative press on the president now is probably diminished since the election is in the past. So that's just a circumstance of how politics works.
Can I throw in a third option? Because what came to my mind is buyer's remorse. Those honest Biden voters who, after he claimed to be the president-elect and started laying out his proposals, they're like, oh, I like Trump better.
And I know that must be true, because they said that what was trending on the search at that time was how to change your votes. So there were people,
Right.
I guess, that were thinking about this. Okay, so Fritz, before we hang up the call, last question for you. What's your prediction? Do you think that President-elect Biden is going to end up being sworn in on January 20th? Or do you think that it's going to be a second term for President Donald Trump?
Well, former Vice President Biden is leading in the election results now, and so that probably means that he's more likely to be the next president. But I would just hold off, and maybe one of the things he should have considered was being gracious and saying thank you for predicting that I'm going to win. I think I am going to win. But let's let the whole process play out, and let the votes get certified, and then I'll declare victory. It's hard to resist, though, when powerful media say you're the winner, then to say, oh well, why don't we hold off? But he's got the upper hand right now, but we'll see how it all works out.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to share your mana'o today, Fritz, and you're going to stay on my speed dial. And as we move through this very, very interesting process, we'll have you back. Thank you so much.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Well, have a great day.
Bye-bye.
So, Mr. Jim Hochberg, let's continue this discussion on the media making the announcement of President-elect Biden. And I like to do that because I can see your eyes are just spinning behind your head every time I say that.
So what people need to remember, they got to go back to probably maybe ninth grade in high school when we learned about our system of government. And for people like me, that was like a really long time ago. So you got to really dig into your memory. How does our system of government elect the president? What was that? Oh, the K. And maybe if you have it electronically on your phone or something, search for the word media, press, news, talking head. They have nothing to do with the selection of the president. So the role of the press is to report facts that are newsworthy. So when we're voting and when the states are tallying the election night results as they get released, in pieces, and the news reports the number of votes and that kind of a thing, that's all perfectly fine. That's their role. But they actually have no role constitutionally in deciding how many electoral votes anybody has, because there are actually no electoral votes cast right now, and they won't be cast until December 14th, because they're not cast by you and me. They're cast by members of the Electoral College, and those members are called electors. And the Constitution, for the 250 years it's been running for us, has always had the people vote the first Tuesday of November, although that may have changed along the road. In my whole life, it's been the first Tuesday of November. And that vote gets certified by the state of Hawaii after only the legal votes are counted. And there's this process. Because we're hearing this thing about count every vote, count every vote. There isn't a single election in the history of the country where every vote was ever counted, because some votes aren't qualified for various reasons and they're excluded. Either they came in late, perhaps they were spoiled because the person didn't follow the instructions, so it can't be counted. Perhaps the person's not entitled to vote. They're a felon, they're not a citizen, they're not old enough, whatever. So a lot of ballots can be cast that are not legal, that are never counted. So this whole mantra about count every vote is erroneous. It's completely erroneous.
Well, I think, and there's, as people are listening to all this craziness that's going on with all the media, and I already know how you feel about all of the media reports about this, I think that people are feeling like, look, Biden has 290 electoral votes. He wins. All the people who don't accept this should just suck it up. I mean, this is what we're hearing, that you should just suck it up and accept that Joe Biden is now the president-elect and we need to move on. But when we're going back to this thing we're talking about, these votes that we're talking about, every state makes it very clear, right, during an election, what qualifies a ballot, correct?
And it's on a state-by-state. Founding fathers were very smart to do. Excuse me. Instead of having a national state-by-state, and as a matter of fact, it's really county by county within the 50 states and the territories and the blah, blah, blahs that get to participate. So every state legislature designs its own election law, which says what a ballot is and all that stuff, what the qualifications are. And the process happens, and then the ballots get evaluated according to the requirements on a state-by-state basis.
And the reason I want to end with that before we jump into the break is because this is exactly why the situation has arisen in Pennsylvania, because there is a law on the books that the legislature came up with on what qualifies on the ballot, but the Supreme Court there came back and actually they did more than what they should have done on this particular law. So when we come back from the break, let's jump into what's happening on Pennsylvania and why we're having this craziness that we're having right now. So we will be right back after this break.
We have a mission here at KALO TV. We continue to be the only local Christ-centered media outlet in Hawaii. God has planted this station to nourish believers and to harvest souls for eternity. It's a calling we hold dear, and today we need your help. Partner with us as we continue to create original local programs.
We're so very grateful for that whole journey.
Walking down to our story room.
Oh my God.
Showcase solid biblical teaching.
We reach more people in one day with the broadcast of the gospel.
It's music to God's ears.
Improve our infrastructure and influence social media. Are you willing to labor with us for Hawaii, for your ohana, for the next generation? Go to kalotv.com and partner with us today.
KALO TV is proud to partner with Family Forum, keeping you informed on legislative issues affecting families in Hawaii today.
Aloha, I'm Eva Andrade. I'm the president of Hawaii Family Forum, and we've been serving Hawaii's faith-based community since 1998. What we do is we provide research and education to the faith-based community to help them understand what's happening at the state capitol and what's happening on the issues that affect the families here in Hawaii. If you would like more information, please visit us on the web. But in the meantime, know that Micah 6:8 says that the Lord requires of us to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And we can help you do that, not only to raise your voice the way that the Lord calls us to raise our voice, but to understand the issues on a scriptural basis, or about what's affecting Hawaii's families. Mahalo.
And then below we have a very special guest. We've got Barry Mcguire. Barry, thanks for joining us.
I finally made it. I finally made it to your show. I've arrived. Okay, Lord, you can take me now.
Your real passion is a TV program that you do called Ignite Your Life, which, by the way, it's also a radio program, and it's on over 800 Christian radio stations in 47 states.
And it's a new TV program here on KALO in Hawaii.
So in your program, as people are watching this, they're going to see you driving these incredible cars and having these great conversations. Classic car guy? or exotic car guy? What best describes you?
We're talking about the Lord. You want to know what kind of car I like for crying out loud?
Don't worry, we're going with it.
I wasn't expecting such a deep theological thought today.
Yeah, well.
Welcome back. We know that everybody's been hanging on with bated breath, wondering how we're going to jump into this talking about what's happening in Pennsylvania. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about the 2000 election, because that has also been getting a lot of airplay on especially conservative stations. So Al Gore did not concede the election in 2000 until December. And then at that time was when Bush was formally declared the winner. So I know you've got some thoughts on that, Jim, that you'd like to share with our listeners today.
Well, and it's really interesting because the tables were turned 20 years ago between the parties, because Al Gore was losing the popular vote to George W. Bush. So the Republican was winning, the Democrat was losing. Today we have Joe Biden, the Democrat, supposedly ahead, and the Republican Donald Trump behind. But the issues are exactly the same. In fact, I want to read a little bit from the Bush versus Gore U.S. Supreme Court decision, just a couple of sentences. So the issue for that case, listen to this. The issue was whether the votes that have been ordered to be counted are, under a reasonable interpretation of Florida law, quote, legally cast votes, close quote.
Did they use the word legally cast votes?
Quotes in the opinion. And I'm actually reading from a St. Louis Post-Dispatch December 10th, 2000 article. And it says that and here's what the Supreme Court said. The reason that that's the issue is the counting of votes that are of questionable legality does, in the view of Justice Scalia, he says, in my view, threaten irreparable harm to Bush and to the country by casting a cloud upon what he claims to be the legitimacy of his election.
So you could actually take the name Bush out of there and put Trump in there, and it would be exactly the same situation.
And that's what I find so interesting, is that part of the Gore v. Bush issue is not what the mainstream media is talking about, where they could be. In fact, on Twitter, there's a disclaimer when people are tweeting about vote fraud and stuff. The disclaimer that Twitter throws out there is this issue of vote fraud is disputed. Well, what's really disputed is the counting of the votes. So they, in lieu of or together with the disclaimer that they're giving, they could also put a disclaimer when Joe Biden, as the president-elect, is tweeted, they could say his vote count is disputed.
I think
but they don't do that.
But Jim, I think this is why so many people are frustrated right now, right? Is because the media has played a lot of roles since Joe Biden has been named president-elect. They have decided that he's won this election, which made a lot of people angry because they feel like with the questions that are out there on these valid votes, these legal votes, that is he truly president-elect until the electors have done their job? So that's number one thing. The second thing that the media has done that's really frustrated people is now they're saying that all of these claims that are being brought up, and my research shows hundreds of affidavits have been formally filed on all these cases. The media is actually dismissing some of these affidavits. They're saying they're not, we've read this is not accurate. These are not good reports.
Can I interrupt you? Because what the media's role is to report what the affidavit says.
Well,
they're not supposed to decide whether it's true or
and
not.
That's and as an attorney, that's what I want people to understand is, does anybody in any case have a right to say that an affidavit is legal or not legal or fraudulent or not fraudulent if they are not a member of the judiciary?
Well, yeah, sure. Anybody can say anything they want. Does it mean anything?
Right.
No.
Right. So if I was going to be on a jury, right, so I'm going through the process of being selected, I would not be able to say, hey, I think this guy's guilty, so please sign me up to be on this jury pool. That wouldn't work? You
would be bounced.
Okay. Well, let's just say. Okay. So Jim, so now that we're talking about what happened in 2000, right? And Gore finally concedes. And I want to make 2 notes about his concession speech. Number one, his concession speech at that time, when I read what people were saying about it, they thought it was actually a really nice concession speech. So he was trying to, he probably wasn't happy about the, the results, but they said it was a very decent concession speech. And what Bush did in his acceptance, very healing, and it was very affirming and very uplifting and very building, because even Bush at that time knew that the country was very, very torn. So moving fast forward now to today, where the media is calling the election, and a lot of people feel like this election should not be called. I want to get your thoughts on that. So let's go into Pennsylvania now. So we're in Pennsylvania, and explain to our listeners why the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania had to get involved on these ballots.
So in 2019 in Hawaii, and at different times in different states, a lot of the states decided through their legislature to change the election law. We talked earlier about election laws are state by state. In 2019 in Hawaii, before there was COVID or anything else, Hawaii went to an all mail-in voting law. And Pennsylvania has all mail-in and stuff like that. And obviously it's not really all mail-in because I voted in person, but that's what they call it. That's the name of the system. And so in Pennsylvania, because of all this media stuff about problems with the post office, remember President Trump was interfering with the operation of the post office, all these accusations. So a lawsuit was filed to change the dates that the legislation in Pennsylvania said ballots had to arrive,
which they said
to be
it was
counted
8 p.m. It had
on
to
election
arrive
day.
On election
Right.
day. So this is very black and white.
Correct.
This is not, somebody can think, okay, maybe 8:05 is okay, right? I mean,
Correct.
we're talking 8
but,
o'clock.
But
is
they
8
weren't
o'clock.
talking minutes or hours. So the lawsuit was that they wanted the court to change the language of the statute from received by to postmarked by. And the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania said, yeah, not only can it be postmarked by then, but you can actually receive it, I think it was 3 or 4 or 5 days later, and still count it. And I mean, it's if you go back to the Amy Coney Barrett confirmation discussion, she was very good at explaining to America that there's 2 views of what judges are supposed to do. Her view is they follow the law and they apply the law. The alternative view, which she doesn't follow, is they make it up to suit their desired outcome. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court made the law to suit their desired outcome. I don't happen to agree with that. Anyway, so that's what they did. So then the dispute went to the U.S. Supreme Court on whether or not Pennsylvania the court is allowed to change the statute for the election in the middle of the election because people had already started voting. The Supreme Court wasn't asked to decide the case. They were asked to set rules. So they said, Justice Alito said, you have to segregate from the votes that come in according to the statute all the ballots that come in according after the statutory requirement within the Supreme Court requirement. The idea being segregate means not mix them.
And it means not count them right now either, does it?
They didn't say you can't count them, and so Pennsylvania counted them, which is dumb because segregating means keeping them separate.
But that's how Biden got the win.
Well,
in
it could be. They don't. I mean, they haven't. I haven't seen a report that says how many. All I saw is a news report that said Pennsylvania said, yeah, we put them in a different box, but we're still counting them.
Well, the only reason that I say that it probably helped Biden is because most of the media outlets say that mail-in voting tends to help Democrats more. So I'm kind of making that assumption. I know you don't like assumptions, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. So the Pennsylvania Supreme Court says one thing. Trump has now asked the United States Supreme Court to weigh in. What are your thoughts? What do you think is going to happen with the Supreme Court?
So it's interesting. Trump did not ask the Supreme Court to review that Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling. The Republican Party did. Trump didn't actually have an interest because he hadn't received a vote.
Although Rudy Giuliani has been everywhere, so he knows what's going on. I mean,
but before Election Day is when the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania made their ruling.
Right.
And Trump didn't have an interest at that time because no votes had been cast that he knew about because nothing had been counted, right? So after the election, that's when he asked to be allowed to join the ongoing case that had already gone up and come back down from the U.S. Supreme Court. That technical little legal thing. But the interesting thing is Pennsylvania is not the only state, and it's not the only problem that people are claiming. There's people with, I think they've got very good reputations for honesty and truthfulness, and they've got stature. They're not, they're not all just a postal worker that says my boss told me to backdate ballots, and that's one of the other issues. But I mean, General Flynn's attorney, I can't think of her name, Sidney Powell, she's talking all about this 2 sets of software that manipulate the vote. I don't know if any of that's true, but she's somebody that I would listen to because she's not likely to make it up. There's other things, though. There's not letting Republicans watch how the mail-in ballots are opened, and it's critical. And people need to realize if you mailed your ballot in, remember you had to write your name on the outside. So when these mail-in ballots arrive, people that are doing the opening of the mail-in ballots, they're supposed to look at your signature on the ballot envelope, look at your signature in the voter rolls, make sure it's a valid facsimile of your signature. It looks like you signed it. If they're not letting Republicans watch that, the Republicans have no idea if any of these envelopes were signed.
Well, and let's be very, very clear about this. In every election, in every year, there is always somebody from the Democratic Party and somebody from the Republican Party that are there verifying this counting that's going on or this tabulation that's happening, right? So that is how we're set up so that nobody can claim that there's unfair practices being conducted.
And I have done that here in Hawaii before. There's a huge different wrinkle this year, and that is the sheer size of the mail-in vote, because in Hawaii in 2019, we changed our voting statute from in-person, unless you qualify for an absentee ballot, to this all mail-in balloting. So it's way more important to the election result validity now under this new system that those signatures are confirmed before the envelope containing the ballots even opened. And then the poll watchers that the Republicans were not allowed to participate with in some of these states are then supposed to look at the ballot and make sure it's properly filled in, because you can actually spoil your own ballot by doing it wrong, in which case it's not a legally cast ballot and it doesn't get counted.
And I think every American citizen should care about that. We should all care about the integrity of the voting system. And I think that in order for us, regardless of which candidate you are backing in this election, you want to be sure that our election system is not wrought with all of these controversies and all of this fraud, right? I mean, wouldn't a normal citizen want fraud to be brought into the light so that it can be corrected?
About 20 years ago, I would have agreed that in this country, probably most everybody would feel that way. I've come to a different conclusion, actually. I think within the last 10 years, our country's begun to divide along the lines of, does truth matter or does winning matter? And we may be at the 50-50 break, where 50% of the people in this country actually think the ends justify the means, and whatever it takes to win is okay, which is why maybe the media's doing what they're doing. It's like they just want the Democrat candidate to win. And the other really weird thing is these glitches. Like I saw a CNN broadcast where the guy showing it on a video stopped it when the glitch happened, because as soon as that glitch happened, the CNN producers went away from the ticking ballot count to the face of the presenter. And so the guy that was making this video slowed it down by clicks, clicked back to the minute that the CNN count was the same as the vote count on the screen. And then when it changed on the screen, but it had not yet changed on the CNN Chyron, you saw Biden get some odd number of votes. I think it was 514 or some weird number like that. But Trump lost in that same second 514 votes.
Yeah, and I want to address that really quick, Jim Hochberg, because what we're seeing happen, which is very, very interesting, right, is people are starting to get fed up with this feeling like their voice is being canceled, right? The cancel culture that is being talked about all over the place. And there has been an astronomical move of the conservative community to move away from some of this, right? Fox News has dropped a ton of viewership. Newsmax TV, actually, I believe on election night, they were the most viewed online newscast. And not just that, I mean, Twitter and Facebook, people are jumping ship and going to Parler. I mean, I cannot tell you how many people have been emailing and texting that they are now setting up accounts on this. So
I even did that.
Yeah, I mean, this is huge. People are beginning to mistrust everything. I mean, and is that where we've come to? Have we come to a nation where we need to mistrust, or that we do mistrust everything that's being fed to us?
So I'm a lawyer, so I kind of need facts. I don't like opinions or suppositions or conclusory information, which is what you get on the mainstream legacy media these days. So instead of telling me that there's no evidence of fraud in the election, which you can get that on almost every channel, I would really rather have them address the specifics that you can also get on other media sources of, okay, so wouldn't let the Republicans watch the postmarks and the signatures and all that stuff on the mail-in ballots. Boxes of ballots arrive at 4:00 in the morning. I mean, there's just long list of things that look like fraud. So instead of just telling me, oh, there is no fraud, they should say, well, this, 27 boxes of ballots that arrived at 4:00 in the morning arrived at 4:00 in the morning by our investigation because the truck got a flat tire. I mean, you can't just dismiss the facts and say there are none. And so to answer your question, it's not that we mistrust everybody. It's that we are smart enough to make our own minds up if we are given the facts. So just give me the facts. Don't give me your opinion or your conclusions. I want to reach that myself.
Well, I tell you, for me, if I was in Biden's position right now, here's what I'd be thinking. Okay, and I realize that I'm kind of a Pollyanna on this, and so our listeners might roll their eyes. But here's the way I think this. If I was going to be the president of the United States, or I believed I was going to be the president of the United States, and half of the country felt that there was fraud going on, I would say, go and investigate, so that when I swear in on January 20th, at least people now know that whatever fraud was dealt with and handled and brought to the surface, so that I can take office and truly try to bring healing. If, as the incoming president, I ignore that or say that it's not happening, which is what we're hearing, then isn't there going to be 4 years, say that all of this pans out and it is Biden that is sworn in on January 20th? Don't you think that half of the country for the next 4 years are not going to suck it up? They're not just going to sit back and say, yep, well, this is the way it is, let's move on. Are they going to feel that this election cheated them from their legal vote?
Probably. And it reminds me of how I felt both times that Bill Clinton got elected. And it reminds me of how I felt both times Barack Obama got elected. But it didn't rise to the level of feeling cheated. I just was very unhappy with the results of the election. I don't know whether conservatives are less likely to feel cheated than the people that have been in the streets burning things and looting and all that stuff have felt cheated. I don't know. It seems to me that we're probably going to accept it because we trust in the government, the truth matters and all that kind of stuff. But I just don't see conservatives getting that wound up because we have jobs, we got to go to work, we got to take care of our families, that kind of stuff. I don't know.
Well, on social media, I have friends on both sides of the aisle, and I know what I find very interesting is that for those that support President-elect Biden, they've been very condescending in their posts to anybody who posts things like, it's not over yet, votes need to be counted, there's fraud going on. So where is the healing that Joe Biden called for? Because didn't he call for, I mean, that's what he said, right?
So right now, and I've been thinking a lot about this in my spare moments of my brain just wandering around by itself. I think we're the entire country, everybody in this country is in the middle of a psychological operation, PSYOP, because the people that want Biden to be elected president are doing everything they can to convince everybody that hears whatever they say that it's already a done deal. And there's no reason to question it. And all of that, I think, is a psychological operation intended to be able to be ginned up into disgust if it turns out that actually the Electoral College elects Trump for re-election. And so I'm very concerned that people are too willing to hear this stuff and take it in as true rather than, like I said before, ask for the facts and come to their own conclusions.
Yeah, and I think we also encourage people, stop. I don't care what side you're on. Stop posting these nasty comments about a person's character. And I'm not talking about President Trump. I'm talking about they're questioning the character and the integrity of the person whose post that they're responding to. Let's just stop and allow this process to go through so that when the decision is made, it's a final decision. So piggybacking on what you just said, what is going to happen if the electoral votes do go and everything changes and President Trump does get his second term? The pandemonium on the other side is going to be probably, at least people believe that it's going to be way crazier, because then they're going to think that Trump restole, as we mentioned earlier, that he restole the presidency.
That's an interesting question. And I think the big difference between this spring and summer, when the riots were all over Portland and Seattle and D.C. and Chicago and Atlanta and whatever, the president was asking the governors of these Democrat-run states to allow him to come in with the National Guard. Of course, they didn't do it. And I think he was doing it that way because he was running for re-election. Maybe he won't wait for them to ask, just because it seems to me, based on what happened in Seattle, when the National Guard showed up before they even got off the bus, but because they were there, the people at that independent zone, they decided to go home. They gave up. I think if the president acts tougher than he did during the election cycle, it's not going to be that bad.
Well, and I think one of the things we didn't have time to talk about, but we'll do it in a future show for sure, is how many pro-life women were elected to the United States House of Representatives. I am lovingly, and you guys are going to hear it first on this station, so I'm taking credit for this. I'm calling them the Life Squad. So they are going to be all of these women who are going to be the squad, but they're going to be the Life Squad, and there's more of them. So let's hope that they get a lot of media attention, so that every time the other side gets their little squad view, we will get the God Squad. If they all believe in God, then I'm happy to call them the God Squad.
That's been taken.
But yeah, but we'll definitely call them the Life Squad.
So I do want to share one thing, because
I
was reading this AP article from 2000 about the Gore v. Bush case, and Justice Harding did not agree with the Florida court that said just keep counting, whether they're legal or not. And at the end of this article, quoting him, he said, the section, which will apply to this election for the loser, calls to mind a quote from football coaching legend Vince Lombardi. And Judge Harding quotes Coach Lombardi, who said, quote, "We didn't lose the game. We just ran out of time."
Okay. Well, so what, Jim, let's end on a positive note here. Well, as positive as we can be in the craziness of the times. And in future shows, we're going to drill down a lot more into what's happening in these states. We didn't get a chance to do that today. But what kind of action are we calling people to do? So I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking, and I'd like you to jump in with your thoughts. So the first thing that we really want to encourage people to do is, first of all, take a deep breath, calm down, and believe that in this great nation there is a process. And the process has been started, right?
The constitutional process.
The Constitution.
It'll end December 14th.
Yeah. So take a step back, breathe in, and don't engage in anger anymore to the people on the opposite side of the aisle. It's unnecessary, because whatever's going to play out is going to play out. Now, I'm not saying give up. I am absolutely not saying that, because I think we want to encourage people to also stay in prayer and stay plugged into the great Creator who's going to keep them from falling off of this great land of peace that we should be in right now. And I'm talking, our mental peace. The other thing that we really want to encourage people to do is to stay plugged in to Hawaii Family Forum, definitely. You can see what we're up to at hawaiifamilyforum.org. Jim, you are also the president of Hawaii Family Advocates, which is a 501c4 organization that is associated with Hawaii Family Forum. So Hawaii Family Forum, as our listeners may or may not know, is a 501c3 organization. So we do mostly education and research. And we're really proud to partner with KALO Radio and KALO TV to make these broadcasts possible. So shout out to all the people behind the scenes that have made this happen. So, Jim, what are your thoughts on Hawaii Family Advocates website, which is hawaiifamilyadvocates.com. You can get more information. As a 501c4, you can do a lot more than a 501c3, so go there to see what Jim is up to. But also stay plugged in your churches. Encourage your pastor. When your pastor preaches on these issues, and we have some fearless pastors that are out there really preaching a message of hope and passion, and stay plugged in and stay active. I think one of the most hysterical things I ever heard, and I love quoting this, was a long time ago pastor who said that when Christians stick their head in the sand, they pose a very tempting target to the devil.
Oh, that's funny.
So we definitely do not want to stick our heads in the sand and pretend that it's not happening, because we are in these crazy times. Any last minute advice for our listeners, Jim?
Well, I hear the concerns about the Biden-Harris administration newly revealed plans that they were saying wasn't their plans all along in the campaign. So it's kind of scary. I mean, depending on how Congress is able to rein in these plans, we could have some really bad stuff for 4 years. But I think it's important in that context to keep the main thing, and use the opportunities to share faith with people who are very wrapped up negatively in this process. And remember for your own self that even the worst it could possibly get under a Biden-Harris administration, with taxes going up and, all that stuff that would come with it, it's still nothing like the Israelites under Pharaoh in Egypt. So God knew about what they were going through. They were there for years and years until they got let out. So keep the main thing. Remember God's on the throne, and stay in prayer.
I love that. And so as we end the show today, we also want to encourage listeners to know that we'd like to do more of these type of shows. So if somebody is feeling like the Holy Spirit is just burning in them and they really want to somehow get involved and make this happen, even if there's a gift that you'd like to make to KALO Radio for all the good things they're doing out there, or to KALO TV for making this message possible, then we really encourage you to visit KALO Radio or KALO TV and reach out to them.
Well, and I can tell everybody listening, I'm James Hochberg, attorney at law. I've been advertising on KALO for probably 20 or 30 years. It's really easy to do. Jump in.
And I'm Eva Andrade, president and CEO of Hawaii Family Forum, and your voice for faith in politics. We'll see you next time. Mahalo, everybody.
Aloha.